Welcome to another episode of The More You Know. It's been 3 weeks since I've done a podcast, and let me tell you, it's a little weird right now. I'm in a new studio, a new office. Hopefully, getting some upgrades to the mic soon that I've been eyeing. But it's good to be back, guys. Today we are joined with all from the other side of the world. Jeremy from the UK. Jeremy, can you give us a brief introduction of yourself, man?
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm Jeremy. I'm from Australia, so I might have a bit of the accent, but I'm living in London right now, so I'm in the UK time zone, and I'm here to talk about cryptocurrency, which is a big passion of mine and has been since 2013.
Yeah, and I think this is the perfect topic to talk about now because Bitcoin yet again is back in the news. It seems like when Bitcoin is just like doing its own thing, growing organically, it's not really in the news. But once it gets a big spike, that's when everyone's like, "Oh, I want to get into it," and that's when it's getting covered on the major news outlets. So. For the newbies who are trying to get into cryptocurrency, Jeremy and I have probably Jeremy has more experience than I do in crypto. But Jeremy, can you explain to us one, what is Bitcoin, and kind of like the explain like on five
Yeah.
definition of blockchain?
Yeah, right. So Bitcoin was invented in 2008, and then the network was started in 2009 by this anonymous creator called Satoshi Nakamoto. And basically, what he wanted to solve was the problem of digital scarcity, right? Which is that previously to 2008, 2009, and that was obviously at the time of that huge financial crisis. Before then, if you wanted to send a file, let's say to somebody on the internet, you could do that, but there's nothing stopping them copying it and sending it to 1,000 other kind of people. And therefore, if you wanted to have any sort of digital asset, you needed to have a central party who managed it, right? So if I was going to send you $10 on PayPal, the reason we can do that is because when I send you the $10, PayPal says, okay, Jeremy has lost $10 and it's transferred over to Brian, who now has an extra $10. So up until the invention of Bitcoin, that was always the way it was. You couldn't have any kind of online transaction system without either a bank or a company of some sort keeping the records. So what the invention of Bitcoin was that Satoshi Nakamoto produced this idea for a network that could keep track of the balances of everybody's number of Bitcoin without it being controlled by a central party. So if you're familiar with file sharing networks like BitTorrent, or the way I imagine cryptocurrencies is it's kind of like BitTorrent, except if you ran an Excel spreadsheet with everybody's bank balances on it, right? And so in that way, because the Excel spreadsheet is shared across all of the nodes on the network, the currency can run and have a fixed supply without anybody having the ability to just print themselves, 10 million Bitcoin and make themselves rich. They can't do that because they have to get the whole network to agree. But because the network agrees on it and there's no central bank or company, that also means that it's not subject to manipulation either by governments who print more of their own currency, or if companies want to shut down certain people that they don't want receiving funds, like WikiLeaks was one of the early examples of that, where the US government and Julian Assange sort of disagreed about what he was doing. So they shut down his ability to get payments. And so that was the kind of original idea. And since then, this whole industry has grown up, starting from that basis and then taking it to more and more different areas, like any version of technology.
The one thing that I do love about cryptocurrency transactions is that once you like, if I wanted to send you $10 worth of Bitcoin right now, you would receive that in 5 minutes at least. And that's the beauty of like why I like cryptocurrency and why I think down the road it's gonna be really hard to implement it into the world and get everyone to trust online digital payments because I feel like there's that. specific category of people who are still old school, who still like the paper cash, who still like to write checks. And I think it's going to take a long time until we get to the world of all digital payments. But I think that you explained it really well and in an easily digestible format.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that it is going to take some time, and but sort of one thing that people don't really think about that much because we have cash and we think of that is that the currencies we use today, very few people actually even use that much cash anymore. Certainly in developed economies like in America or the UK, people have a little bit of cash, but mostly their money is in a bank account, right, that they access online. So really, they're already using a digital currency, so the transition is actually not as stark as it seems to be to most people. And governments are actually trying to get rid of cash, and ATMs are being less populated around the place. And with coronavirus, again, there's been sort of, oh, well, handling cash could be spreading it around and all these kind of things, right? So cash is going extinct one way or another. So it is actually kind of an opportunity for cryptocurrency rather than a problem in that sense, from my point of view.
I definitely do agree with that, and I think that was the best time for cryptocurrency itself to get its name in the spotlight. Mostly because Bitcoin is in all of the like major finance news of like, oh, Bitcoin just hit $55,000 today. It just smashed through 60,000, and it's just always going to be making these headlines, and it's always going to get new adopters. It's just the retailers now they have the opportunity to really cash in on a good opportunity of allowing Bitcoin payments because if you think about it, like if you pay like there's that one incident long ago, like that guy paying like 10 like couple thousand bitcoins for a pizza,
Yeah,
and
10,000.
now
Yeah, 10,000 Bitcoin. The first ever Bitcoin transaction for anything was 10,000 Bitcoins for two pizzas. Yeah.
like that's just crazy of like how once you pay for something, that business owner who got your Bitcoin now, they can either be a lot more richer or a lot more poorer. So I think that's a very interesting concept of when people say that Bitcoin should be a method of payment because it's kind of like a win or lose type of thing because if you if you remember back in like 2017 when Bitcoin first hit $20,000 and then it crashed all the way back down to 8,000. So
Mm.
if you bought stuff from like a merchant and gave Bitcoin when it was like 20,000, like that's like just like the depreciation of that Bitcoin if you were the business owner would be, I mean, I don't know, it just depends. It just I feel like they would have to develop a system where if you buy something with Bitcoin, it would automatically convert to US dollars.
Yeah,
I can see.
there are systems out there like that, right? So there's a company called BitPay that is very famous for this, but there's other solutions, and in fact, recently they've been developing financial tools so that you can lock in the value of your cryptocurrency, but in US dollars or whatever for exactly this reason, right? Because if you're
Oh,
trying to run a
really?
business, yeah, I mean, if you're trying to run a business, your concern is running the business. It's not speculating on the price of cryptocurrency, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so obviously there is a market for that, and people are developing those tools and solutions. So I think we are going to see more and more of those kind of things get rolled out. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. That's very interesting. Yeah, it just shows how long that I've been out of the crypto world, where I didn't even know that that type of technology existed. So, I mean, since we're talking about like the prices of Bitcoin, and how today it's even I think last time I checked it, it was touching like 59,000 dollars,
Hmm.
and a a common question that I get asked when people ask me what cryptocurrency should I buy, or it's like, should I invest in crypto or not? And their biggest question is, where does the value come from? How is one Bitcoin valued at $59,000 and the US dollar is whatever price it is? I mostly just tell them that it's kind of just like security. it's a value of security and scarcity of something. And for me, I have a very hard time explaining kind of like the value aspect of it. How would you say Bitcoin gets its value?
Right. Well, I mean, there's a few different ways that you can think about it, but essentially the fundamentals of it is economics, right? Is that there's supply and demand. So Bitcoin has a fixed supply. There's only 21 million Bitcoins, although you can chop them up into little pieces, so everybody can still trade with them, no matter what the price is, right? Because they can just have smaller and smaller fractions of Bitcoins. But there's a limited supply, and as I sort of alluded to initially, this limited supply is outside the control of any government. So, for instance, in 2020, more than one fifth of all the US dollars in the entire world were created just in 2020, right? The supply of US dollars expanded more than 20%. So if you are a holder of US dollars, the value of your currency is constantly dropping because there's more of that currency being printed, right? So the value of each individual amount is less, higher supply. With Bitcoin, that's not really a problem. And so as people sort of caught on to this idea that in the long run, if there's more and more fiat currency, like more US dollars being printed, but there's only a fixed amount of Bitcoin, then the Bitcoin will retain that value while the US dollar sort of slowly degrades. And so once you have that idea, then it becomes a self perpetuating cycle, right? Because the first guy, like we said, he traded for some pizza, and then people started to see, wow, this has some utility. So now it has utility, and it also has a strong fixed supply. And then more people join in, and that gives it more value and more utility because there's more people you can trade with, and because there's also so demand is going up, but there's still a limited supply, and then that cycle, like you said, it generally happens in manias where people realize, oh, we're all flooding into it at once, and then they realize, oh, we don't actually get it yet, and so they all sell out, and then they all flood back into it, right? So it happens in quite a extreme cycles. But in the long term view, let's say over the last 12 years, right, Bitcoin has gone from $0 to, like you're saying, about $60,000 now, and that trend just constantly reinforces itself. So for essentially for individuals who might be worried that the value of their savings is being depleted, the same reason that people buy like stocks, for instance, right? Because they know that they want to save their money so that when they retire in 30 years, if they just held on to it, their grandmother bought a movie ticket for 20 cents and now a movie ticket is $20, right? And so you can just extrapolate that forward into the future, and they might think, well, the same thing could happen to me. So they might buy some stocks. Well, they might also buy some Bitcoin. It would be the exact same idea, which is that that's not going to have an increasing supply, and it will preserve that value. So that's the most basic case, I think, for the value of Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency.
Yeah, yeah, I like that definition of it. And I can tell you that starting with trading cryptocurrencies first and then moving into stocks is the complete opposite way to go, because I
Yeah.
started trading cryptos like a while back. Is when I would do it a lot, and then like the gains that you would see in a day, or like the losses that you would see in a day, insane. And then you go over to stocks, and then you're just like, oh, cool, I'm up like 2%. How exciting!
Yeah,
And
it's
then there's
boring, right?
people,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very very boring. And then I just see people getting hyped like, oh man, I'm up 2% today. Let's go out. And I'm like, dude, this is nothing. I
Yeah.
would like, and like the fact that cryptos are 24/7. That's one thing that is amazing. But I couldn't imagine being like a full time crypto trader, because that's just like anxiety all day, every day.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely a few years ago when I got really into, I think a lot of people do. It's sort of a phase a lot of people go through where you think, "Oh, wow, I can get rich overnight or whatever," which is not actually necessarily really true any more than the first person who hosted up a website instantly became rich or anything. I mean, there was a lot of people that made a lot of money in the early internet, but there was also a lot of people that just had the wrong idea and were wasting their own time, right? Uh, and I mean, that's the same with crypto, right? You can get into it and you can trade it and you can feel like you're in the Wolf of Wall Street or something. But pretty quickly, you realize that, okay, there's people with a lot more money, a lot more experience. They've got trading bots, they've got connections with all the major exchanges or whatever. And you're just totally outclassed and outgunned. So you're basically not going to make money. But you have a bit of fun because, like you said, the volatility is insane and it really gets the dopamine flowing in your brain. And then once you sort of come down off that high and you think, wait, what am I doing? You realize, okay, I'm probably actually just handing money to more experienced traders by doing this. But it is fun. It is definitely fun, and it gets you into the idea and the mindset of cryptocurrency and a free market of fluctuating currencies and stuff as well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. One thing that I'm curious on too. I have been out of the game for a while, like I said. So I haven't been keeping up with regulations with cryptocurrencies. How is crypto really regulated over there in the UK? And do you know much about how the US is treating cryptos? Because I did hear one case that I'll talk about after you say this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably a few years back, like about 2014, 2015, it was this huge issue in the cryptocurrency community was, well, what if the government bans it or it suddenly becomes unviable for that reason, or what if countries lock it down? I'm not in the long term really that worried about countries banning it because plenty of countries have banned it and then they usually tend to unban it pretty soon after, right? Nigeria has done that recently, China has done it at various times. Different provinces and countries all over the world have tried that, but the problem for them is that it's a global phenomenon. So if they ban it in that country, that actually doesn't really ban cryptocurrency, it just bans them from cryptocurrency. And since it's online, all the companies and everything, they just relocate to a place that's more friendly to it. And the more countries that do ban it, then the higher the incentive is for somewhere else to say, okay, we'll be the crypto capital or the crypto haven, and then all the money floods to them, right? So it's like drug legalization in the US. It's actually better for the government if they just legalize it, and then they can get a share of the tax revenue. So I think for the most part, most countries in the world have actually been fairly uncertain or neutral on cryptocurrency. Like in the UK, they put out some guidance. I was actually looking at it the other day. So there are some caveats and whatever, especially if you're going to be a financial services company, right? If you're going to be holding people's money and whatever, then maybe some of the banking style provisions apply. But for smaller or more casual use, or for merchants who just want to accept it, or that kind of thing, there are some rules about how you should go about it, but nobody's suggesting, oh wait, we're just going to ban this and get rid of it entirely.
Speaking of taxes, how it like is it taxed differently in the UK? Like, are you taxed if you convert it, or um, if you transfer it, or is it only if you trade it?
Yeah, well, I guess that will depend where you are, right? So it's different for me in Australia versus in the UK, and in America, it's different again. But in the UK at the moment, they do have some regulations, which, yeah, again, it sort of depends on what category you fall into, right? So if you're being a trader, then it does fall into more of those regulations, like people who do, high frequency trading of uh, currencies, government currencies, or people who trade stocks and all those kind of things. It does fall into those financial categories. If you are using it as an individual, then you sort of have to track, okay, at what price did I acquire it? And then if I was selling it or spending it, what price did that happen? And then there's sort of a kind of like a capital gains type calculation that goes into that. But I think probably as more and more, this is all very in flux because the amount of cryptocurrency use is still small. But I think as more and more people get involved in cryptocurrency, I think the government, their regulations will probably change a little bit because it just won't be feasible for everybody in the whole economy, if they're all trading around cryptos, to be following the taxation on every single transaction, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's silly to even consider the fact that if you spend cryptocurrency or if you convert, say, Bitcoin to Ethereum or Ethereum to Bitcoin, and you can just convert how much you have into that amount. I think it's silly that you can be taxed on that. I don't understand why cryptos can't really be treated as like stocks, because stocks are just, if you hold it, then you just pay taxes on when you sell it. Why? Like,
Mm.
I don't understand myself. I mean, maybe I don't know enough about it. I just don't get why it can't be treated as that same type of ordeal.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. Again, it does sort of depend on what country or location. Like some places, they have a certain threshold amount that if it's below that, then it's just small trades and it's kind of tax free. Or if it's over a larger amount, again, if you're holding it on behalf of somebody else, or if you are treating it as a stock where you just hold it and you just sit on it for 5 years versus, oh, okay, I'm earning it from my job and then I want to spend it at different merchants. Sometimes that's treated differently as well too. So I think for governments, definitely it's a huge challenge because the rate of innovation, just like when they had to try and regulate the internet. They were quite behind on that, right? The government always lags behind the tech sector and innovation of things that are being built because they just build things so fast that the government can't always keep up in understanding or let alone determining what is the appropriate regulation for things.
Jumping to another topic of crypto, I know that a lot of people say that there are a lot of use cases for blockchain and cryptocurrencies, and that's where we enter the altcoin universe.
Yeah.
And could you really explain what altcoins really are, what they plan on doing, how they differ, and how they differ from Bitcoin? Really.
Yeah, so Bitcoin was the sort of the first and the original, and to me, it had the sort of the killer app of cryptocurrencies, which was to try and be money, right? To be a new currency, a new thing that you could trade, and that was the most important part of it. But subsequent to that, because Bitcoin is just a software project, right? You can, and because it's open source as well, it's publicly available, anybody can go and look at, here's the complete source code, everything that you need to run it. So at a certain point, pretty early in its development, people realized, wait a second, what if I wanted to make my own version of Bitcoin, right? I think that instead of having 21 million Bitcoin, we should have 42 million, and I'm going to call it Jeremy Coin, right? Then I can just copy that and make my own version. I can tweak or modify it in whatever way I want, and then just launch it out to the rest of the world. So it's sort of like hosting websites on the internet. Anybody who has their own grand ideas for what should be on a website can host it up and put up their own content and make whatever changes they want. And then the public is sort of free to decide, well, I like this website or I don't like this website, which one I'm going to go to. And so the same is true in cryptocurrencies, that anybody who has an idea, like let's say if they have a certain political idea that, oh, okay, if we had taxation redistribution, right, if we had a universal basic income, for instance, they could make a cryptocurrency where that happened automatically, and that was just the rules that was baked into the currency. And then obviously the challenge for them would be convincing other people to use it, right? So it's very easy to make a cryptocurrency, it's very hard to get other people to also buy in and believe in your vision for it. And on top of that, once people had this technology of thinking about digital scarcity and a transaction ledger, like in the Excel spreadsheet that I talked about, they started having other ideas of what they could do about it. So the second biggest cryptocurrency is called Ethereum. And the idea with that was that it was supposed to be programmable money. So Bitcoin does have some limited capability for that, but Ethereum just like cranked it up to the maximum, where they had the idea that you could have, for instance, a robot organization, right? That didn't physically exist, but which could own Ethereum on their network and could then trade it at will. So you can imagine, for instance, let's say in 5 years, if self driving cars are rolling out everywhere, you could have a robot that owned a self driving car and then used it to do Uber rides. And then as the customers paid it, the robot is earning money. And then the robot can eventually buy another car, right? And then it's earning with two, and then it's three, and then suddenly this robot is running its own fleet of Uber, all of with its own money, right? There's nobody kind of managing it because it can manage its own finances using this programmable money. So people have had all these grand ideas about all kinds of different new applications that money or tracking different digital assets can be used for, and that manifests in the thousands of different alternative currencies or altcoins to Bitcoin.
Because like I know that in the beginning of when Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies were coming into light, it was really easy to make a scam coin. Really,
Yeah.
I know that there were a lot of scam coins out there, and a lot of people got rich, but then again, a lot of people got poor too.
Yeah,
And
that's pretty much the summary. Yep.
and I think it's awesome that there are some like legitimate projects out there that are trying to, because I know that Bitcoin kind of gets like a bad name for itself because a lot of people just associate it with the Silk Road, crime, and all that stuff. And I think it's awesome that there are projects out there that are developing software and like cryptos that are used for real world applications. I know that me myself, I am a supply chain major, so I deal. So I've been studying a lot of like how. Well, I've been looking at how blockchains can really affect and benefit the supply chain world. Are you familiar with a lot of like industry use cases of blockchains and like how people say finance or even health or healthcare and all that is a really big sector for it. Oh my God! Speaking of finance, let's talk about not SoFi, DeFi,
DeFi, yeah.
because
So
DeFi is a huge thing right now, and I don't know much about DeFi. I know I just see it popped up around a lot of places. Could you kind of explain what DeFi really is?
yeah, so DeFi or decentralized finance, right? So the decentralized comes from the idea that it's on the network, right? Like Bitcoin is a decentralized currency as opposed to a bank being a centralized kind of currency. And then with technology like Ethereum, and there's a bunch of others that are in a similar vein, people had this idea of, okay, so we've got a kind of a currency running, but what if we didn't just replace currency? What if we replaced essentially the entire financial system, right? So one example of that might be a loan. So, like with these bots that I was talking about before that could be running Uber, another thing they could be doing is they could be giving you a loan where there was the fixed rate of interest that you had to pay to them, and but they would give you a short-term loan based on you depositing some collateral, and then that you would obviously have to pay back your loan, but it's all enforced in the code automatically. So it doesn't involve a bank. It doesn't necessarily involve, signing up or doing a lot of legal paperwork or any of the problems people have when they try and get loans. Instead, it's just if you can establish some sort of online reputation or have the online collateral, for instance, in Bitcoin, then you can provide that to the contract and get these automatic financial services. So it's still a bit of a new area, and as it's got a lot of rough edges, right? So one of the other big use cases at the moment is for automated trading, because obviously people have been doing a lot of speculating to try and get rich, exactly like we were talking about. So let's say if I wanted to buy some uh, bit, I wanted to buy some Ethereum, let's say, with my Bitcoin, then in a typical exchange model, I would go to a company that is an exchange and I would say, look, here's my Bitcoin. And they would match me up with somebody who wanted to sell Ethereum. and we would do the swap like that, right? I'm trading my Bitcoin to them, they're trading their Ethereum to me, and the company helps to match us up together. But in a DeFi world, instead of having trading between two people, you can have a trade with only one person. Where if I have Bitcoin, I can go to a program, a bot that runs on a network like Ethereum, and what it does is it has a pool of Bitcoin and a pool of Ethereum, and it looks at the ratio of those two assets that it has, and it says, okay, here should be the price. And then if I'm buying Bitcoin, then it will give me back some Ethereum and then adjust its price based on the new ratio that it has of those coins, which means that anybody in the world can trade, any amount at any time, because they don't need to wait for somebody else to be ready to do the other side. The bot is always ready to trade with with everyone for uh, as they want. And then the one part that is attracting a huge amount of people to this idea is that the bot's initial supply of Bitcoin and Ethereum, if you can loan your money to the bot and it will hold that balance and use it for the trades. But in a like in the traditional model where the exchange is sitting in the middle taking a transaction fee for matching up people, instead, in this model, the bot is the one taking the exchange fee and it's giving it back to the people who provided the initial money for it to use in the trades. So they're sort of profiting out of having their money on loan to this bot. So that's like one example, is replacing currency exchanges, and there's a lot more, right? And in the future, who knows what they'll dream up next, right, with these new applications that they're creating. But DeFi is just more the umbrella term for all these different kinds of new facilities that cryptocurrency has opened up in terms of creating new financial products, which are either a different spin on existing banking technology, or sometimes just something completely new that wasn't even possible beforehand.
Yeah, yeah, and that's how for me. That's how I kind of think of altcoins right now. Is that um, like I'm gonna take maybe the top 50 altcoins, and if you look at the altcoins, they're they're doing something that a major company is already doing, but it's just incorporating blockchain.
Mm.
So there's going to be like JP Morgan Chase identicals. Well, I don't want to say identicals, like mimics of JP Morgan Chase in the crypto universe. There's going to be, I'm blanking on some softwares that can be mimicked by crypto. Well, it's like the cryptocurrency version
Like
of it.
PayPal and all those things, yeah.
Yeah,
Venmo or Square or whatever, Stripe, yeah, any of the banks,
Venmo.
obviously, yeah.
Venmo is a really interesting case that I need to look into more, and maybe you can help me answer this. Uh, Venmo withdrawals and transfers are insanely fast,
Mm.
and I'm wondering how they're managing to do this, because that's one thing that I've always been curious about. Because Bitcoin takes like a couple minutes, but Venmo I feel like is fast, and I don't know if there's anyone else out there that's like as fast as Venmo, because I can initiate a withdrawal from my Venmo account and put it into my bank account, and it's there in like 12 hours or maybe a day. So I'm wondering what are the technologies behind that right now that are allowing them to be so fast?
Well, I think they just have probably a lot of existing banking contacts and stuff like that, right? And perhaps they're even taking the risk of some sort of percentage of fraud, and they're willing to take that loss in order to make their service more sped up and more, more user friendly for people. I agree with you. I don't I don't actually know the specifics of Venmo, but it's been interesting that we've seen the rise of all of these kind of payment apps and different services kind of in parallel to cryptocurrency, right? Because one thing that cryptocurrency did was it made the existing market aware how difficult it was to use financial products in a lot of cases, and was starting to fill that niche. And then other people thought, right, okay, we've got to compete, right? So cryptocurrency, even if you're somebody who is not interested in it, or you don't like the sound of it, well, it's just benefited everybody because it's raised the bar for financial products in the entire market.
I got you. I got you. And as kind of like a uh, closing topic or question for you, where do you really see the crypto atmosphere going in like the next 5 to 10 years? Oh, 5 years and then 10 years with adoption and like the news of Bitcoin getting around and just regulations in general. Where do you see it going? Like, do you think it's going to be more widely accepted in like a lot of places, or what?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, as we've mentioned, it definitely happens in manias. So I think it will happen in huge bursts and then be quite quiet for a while. But just day by day, you can't go backwards when it comes to cryptocurrency, right? If you've never heard of it, the first time you've heard of it, well, now you've heard of it, and then the first time your friend does a trade with you or something, well, now you're a little bit involved, and then the first time that you're buying, goods or services with it, well, now you're that involved, right? And so I think that's just going to spread to more and more people. And because there is such a huge universe of apps and different DeFi products and different altcoins and everything, there's kind of something for everybody, right? So people can get involved in it as and when it makes sense to them individually. But I think cryptocurrency is definitely going to keep growing. It's going to keep spreading around in society. I sort of am hoping that we're going to see a bit more adoption in the physical world, like you're saying that you can go down down the road and buy your sandwich with it. But it might be the case that really it just continues to grow mostly online, which would also be fine because obviously it's native sort of to the internet. So there are all these apps and different products being developed. And if you get into cryptocurrency, it's very weird because people usually get involved for because they want to try and speculate or make money or trade, like we were talking about. And there's that gateway between trading their government, traditional money for cryptocurrency. But then once they've got cryptocurrency, they discover this whole new universe of different apps and things that they can be involved with, which they didn't know about initially. They didn't get involved for that reason. But once they are involved, because cryptocurrency is so easy to send around and flowing around all these apps on the internet, so suddenly they can be involved in those things. So I think those things will just get more advanced, and they'll be more interesting, and they'll sort of draw more people into them, and perhaps even so in the next 5 years. So that's about time to have one more cryptocurrency bubble, since it tends to be about 3 to 5 years that it has a big mania. So yeah, maybe in the next one, one thing I definitely think we'll see is a lot more large companies will be starting to hold cryptocurrency reserves. So like Tesla recently bought a lot, and there will be other companies too, like Apple, Facebook, Amazon. I think it's almost a certainty, really, that they're going to have to get into the game at some point, or they'll just be left behind. So I think that will be one thing. Probably as regards to 10 years, probably by that time, it'll be like governments of different countries will be in the same situation where it's just got to such a point that they will need to be involved. They just can't be completely left out of the new financial system really starting to take over. So I think those are the things that I would think are most likely, and maybe also integration with the existing financial services is going to continue. So recently, Mastercard and Visa, Apple Pay, those kind of products have been talking about adding cryptocurrency integrations in their own different ways. So it will become more and more of a hybrid. There'll be less separation between cryptocurrencies and sort of government currencies, and they will sort of start to merge at the edges as things get more fluid between the two. So yeah, I guess those are my predictions.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that timeline is a very reasonable timeline that these things can be get that that these things can get done by. And not to shill a coin or anything, but you mentioned governments getting involved in some crypto. Cardano getting integrated somewhere in Africa.
Yeah,
They're definitely leading the charge here. I'm not shilling it or anything, but big believer in that. But yeah, I definitely agree with your points that you did make from what you said. I definitely agree that those are definitely attainable in 5 to 10 years. I think one last bubble will definitely project it onto the right path. So after say maybe even after this year, we might get some silence from the cryptocurrency world, and then come in 2025, 2024 is when it's going to get back in the main news, and the technologies behind everything are going to be more advanced and innovated, that there's going to be no way that people can't adopt it in a faster method, and just how governments cannot ignore it anymore.
yeah.
But Jeremy, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast. Where can my listeners find you on social medias, or if you have a podcast yourself?
Yeah, so we didn't really get onto it, but I'm a huge fan of the. I mean, that's fine. I love talking about all cryptocurrency, really, but I have my own podcast, which is about cryptocurrency in general to a certain extent, but it's focused on my favorite cryptocurrency, which is Bitcoin Cash, which is an alternative to Bitcoin and to all the other cryptocurrencies. So people who are interested in finding out more about cryptocurrencies and maybe with Bitcoin Cash as a specific example that they can sort of try to wrap their head around, they can check that out. I have a website. It's just bitcoincashpodcast.com. It's on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts and all those things. So they can find me there to check that out if they're more interested in cryptocurrencies or in in Bitcoin Cash specifically. Either way.
Yeah, and I think we did a good job in this episode of explaining the basis of cryptocurrencies and like what they are, how they can be used. Yeah, guys, check out his podcast if you want to hear more about how. I assume that you probably talked about how Bitcoin Cash became a cryptocurrency
Yeah.
in the first place. So yeah, it's his podcast is a good place to learn more about altcoins and just more about how kind of flawed Bitcoin is. I want to say,
It's
and
got some issues there, definitely. That's for
it's
sure.
yeah, it's got some issues, and just to learn more about like altcoins and just how cryptos are just work in in like yeah, in general.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks Jeremy for coming on, and catch you guys on the next episode of The More You Know. I'm so excited to be back. It's so good to be podcasting again and talking to people. But yes, check it out. I'll have his podcast in the description of this. And yeah, catch you
Thanks
guys
for having me.
next week.
It's been
Yeah,
great.
thanks for coming on, man. All right, and that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed this show of The More You Know. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating this podcast on Apple Podcasts. It'll certainly help me out in the algorithm, and be sure to subscribe or follow to The More You Know on your favorite podcasting platform like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. And lastly, if you would like to contribute to The More You Know, you can head over to anchor.fm forward slash The More You Know Pod and contribute any monetary value to help the quality of the show, and in the future bring on some more interesting guests. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate all of my listeners, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week.